Chapter 1. The Sudden Silence. Seattle was unusually quiet that morning. The rain had paused, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Emily Tran sat in the living room of her parents' two-story house in Capitol Hill, her fingers trembling as they gripped the phone. The last words of the police officer still echoed in her ears. "We're sorry, ma'am. Your parents were in a fatal accident on I-5. They didn't make it." She couldn't move. The world had collapsed in a single sentence. Across from her, Brandon paced the floor. Eyebrows furrowed, phone pressed to his ear. Unlike her, he was already thinking about logistics, hospital paperwork, death certificates, the company they owned, the family lawyer. Emily had always known her brother was practical, even cold. But today, she realized something else. He wasn't grieving. He was calculating. Their parents, David and Anna Tran, had owned a small but successful interior design company called Tran Design and Company. It had grown modestly over the past 15 years, supplying luxury furniture and home decor across the Pacific Northwest. Emily had once dreamed of joining the company after college, but her father gently encouraged her to find her own voice. "You're the artist of the family," he had said. Now they were gone. Just like that, Brandon hung up and turned to her. "We need to settle the estate quickly," he said bluntly. "I've already spoken to Mr. Shepard, Dad's lawyer. The will's being updated since the last version is from 5 years ago." Emily looked at him, eyes wide. "Updated? What do you mean?" "They just passed. You're already talking about the will." Brandon's tone didn't soften. "Someone has to handle things. You've never been involved in the company, Emily. You've been doing your own little art projects. I'm the one who stayed." Emily flinched at the word little. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Brandon had always looked down on her passion for handmade decor and sustainable design. She stood up. "I want to see the will myself. Mom and Dad wouldn't leave me with nothing." Brandon smirked. "Sure, but don't be surprised. The house, the shares, the savings, it's all tied to the business. And I've been running that business. Naturally, most of it comes to me." 3 days later, in the cold marble office of Mr. Shepard, her fears were confirmed. Her name was barely mentioned. Brandon inherited the house, the company, and 95% of the liquid assets. Emily was left with a small trust fund, barely enough for 6 months of rent in Seattle. "But my parents," she protested, heart thudding. "They loved us both." "Why would they?" Mr. Shepard cleared his throat. "Your parents believed Brandon would take care of you. They structured it this way to avoid confusion in the business continuity." Brandon sat back in the leather chair, arms crossed, smug. That night, Emily lay in her childhood room, staring at the ceiling. The room felt like a museum, untouched, frozen in time. The shelves still held her handmade sketchbooks, old pine cones painted gold, a dream catcher she made at 14. Her mother's gentle touch was everywhere, in the folded curtains, the lavender scent on the pillowcases. By morning, Brandon knocked on the door. No emotion on his face. "I need the room cleared by Friday," he said. Emily stared at him, stunned. "You're kicking me out?" He shrugged. "It's not personal. You need to figure your life out. You're 27, Emily. Grow up." She packed in silence. No farewell, no hug. Brandon didn't offer to help her find a place or lend her money. He didn't even walk her to the door. By Friday evening, she sat in her old Corolla, parked outside a 24-hour grocery store, staring at the roof of the car. Her suitcases took up the back seat. She had nowhere to go. The city she had grown up in suddenly felt hostile, unfamiliar. For 2 nights, she slept in the car. It was cold. She wore 3 layers and still shivered. On the 3rd morning, she walked into a small cafe called Sunlight Brew, hoping to use the restroom and maybe get a cup of hot tea. The smell of cinnamon and roasted coffee greeted her like an old friend. The cafe was warm, cozy, filled with wooden tables and soft jazz. Behind the counter was a middle-aged Asian woman with kind eyes and short silver hair. "You okay, honey?" the woman asked gently. "You look like you haven't slept." Emily hesitated, embarrassed. I'm fine. I just needed a place to sit." The woman paused, reading her face. Then she said, "We're hiring. Just a few hours a day. Cleaning tables, washing cups. Nothing fancy, but it's honest." Emily blinked. "I don't have my resume." "You look like someone who needs a fresh start more than a resume." "I'm Linda," she said, extending a hand. Emily took it. It was warm and firm. She didn't realize she was crying until Linda handed her a napkin. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 will follow Emily's first steps into independence and her growing bond with Linda. Chapter 2. A cup of warmth. The steam from the dishwater fogged Emily's glasses as she stood at the sink in the back of Sunlight Brew, her arms submerged in soapy water. Her back ached slightly, and her hands were red from scrubbing mugs and plates for the past 2 hours. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. She had a place to go. She had a purpose. However small, Linda had given her more than just a job. She'd given her dignity. The cafe itself was like a little sanctuary. Sunlight Brew wasn't part of any chain, just a neighborhood place tucked between a second-hand bookstore and a vintage flower shop. Warm wooden tones, plants hanging from the ceiling, handwritten signs, and hand-painted mugs made it feel more like someone's living room than a business. At first, Emily was hesitant to talk to the customers. She kept her eyes down, focused on her tasks, clearing tables, sweeping floors, scrubbing pans. But Linda had a way of encouraging her without pushing. One afternoon, Linda gently nudged her toward the register. "Take orders for me, just for an hour. It'll help you practice that smile." Emily nodded nervously, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her first customer was an elderly man with a walking cane and a warm, toothy grin. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, squinting at her name tag. "Emily," she replied. "Well, Emily, you make the best cappuccino I've had all year," he said after taking a sip. "And I'm not saying that just because I'm old." She smiled, a real one. It was small, but that moment stuck with her. She began to speak more to the regulars, a college student with purple headphones always buried in textbooks, a young mom with twin toddlers who spilled more than they sipped, and the quiet guy in the corner who wrote poetry on napkins. In the evenings, after the shop closed, Linda would brew chamomile tea for both of them. They'd sit by the front window, watching rain dance on the glass. Emily rarely spoke about her past, but Linda never pushed. One night, Emily finally opened up. "It happened so fast," she whispered, staring into her cup. "The crash, the funeral, the betrayal. My brother didn't even flinch. He just took everything." Linda was quiet for a moment. Some people grieve by grabbing onto control. Others fall apart. But you, Emily, you built from nothing. "I didn't build anything," Emily said, her voice cracking. "I'm just a waitress washing dishes." Linda tilted her head. "Not true. You walked in here with nothing. And now you're here, showing up every day. That's building. Brick by brick." Emily looked down at her hands. They were still red and worn, but stronger now. That night, she dreamed of colors. Not just random shapes, but real textures, fabrics, paper, patterns. In her mind, she was designing again, just like she used to in college. Her hands moved over blank spaces, painting stories in blush pinks and soft earth tones. She awoke with an idea. At the cafe that morning, while wiping tables, she looked around and saw potential. The cafe was beautiful but a little outdated in parts. The counter area could use more functional shelving. The light fixtures flickered. The menu board was hard to read. "Linda," she said hesitantly. "Can I show you something?" Linda raised an eyebrow. Sure. Emily pulled out her old sketchbook. She'd retrieved it from the back seat of her car a few days ago. The pages were worn, the cover stained. But inside, the pencil sketches were precise and full of character. She pointed to a page. This is a shelving layout that could give you more space behind the counter. And these, she flipped to another page, are hand-lettered menu designs I could do for the wall. I can make it easier to read, but still keep the cafe's warm feel. Linda studied the pages for a long time, nodding slowly. You did all this? She asked. Emily nodded. I studied design. I just stopped believing I could do anything with it. Well, it's time to believe again, Linda said, smiling. Let's start with the shelves. For the next few weeks, Emily split her time between cafe work and refurbishing the space. She sanded old wood, painted new signs, rearranged plants, and even created handmade candle holders using recycled glass. Customers noticed. Who's the designer behind this new vibe? Asked one woman. It's like stepping into a magazine now. Linda just smiled and pointed toward Emily. Soon, one of the customers, an event planner named Marisa, approached Emily with a proposal. I'm doing a wedding in 2 months, Marisa said. Eco-theme. Intimate, warm, handmade style. Your aesthetic is exactly what I need. Would you be interested in doing the decor? Paid, of course. Emily blinked. Me? I mean, I've never done something that big. But you've done this cafe, Marisa said. That's enough for me. Emily hesitated only a second. Yes, I'll do it. When she told Linda later that evening, Linda raised her teacup in a mock toast. To the rebirth of Emily Tran, she said. Emily laughed, but her eyes misted. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just surviving. She was becoming. Chapter 3. The First Commission. Emily stared at the blank sketch pad on her small desk in the corner of her room, if you could call the back room of Sunlight Brew a room. Linda had let her turn it into a temporary place to stay, with a fold-out cot, a small lamp, and the faint smell of coffee that clung to the walls. Her first paid job. The idea thrilled her and terrified her. The wedding planner, Marisa, had given her a brief, warm, eco-friendly, simple but elegant. Outdoor garden ceremony. About 50 guests. Emily had nodded confidently during their meeting, but now, left alone with her sketchpad, self-doubt began to creep in. Who was she to take on a real wedding job? She looked around the cafe for reassurance. Her shelving design was in full use, and her chalkboard menu hung proudly above the counter. Customers had complimented the changes every day. Still, this felt different, bigger, more visible. She took a deep breath and started sketching. By the end of the week, Emily had crafted a full design proposal, handmade centerpieces with dried lavender and eucalyptus, personalized name cards from recycled paper, and string lights wrapped in hemp rope for a rustic effect. She used natural earth tones, beiges, soft greens, and terracotta to match the garden venue. Marisa was impressed. This is perfect, she said, flipping through Emily's sketches. You really have an eye. I knew it the moment I saw those hand-painted signs at the cafe. I'm still learning, Emily admitted. But I'll give it my all. You're not just learning, Marisa said. You're starting. Over the next few weeks, Emily spent every free moment crafting for the wedding. She scouted thrift stores and local artisan markets for affordable materials. Linda offered the cafe's back patio as a temporary workspace. Some evenings, she worked until midnight under string lights, her hands covered in glue and paint. And one evening, as she arranged wildflowers into tiny mason jars, someone cleared their throat behind her. It was Michael Alvarez. Emily blinked in surprise. He looked the same, maybe even better. Taller, still carrying that calm air about him. A few years ago, they had both attended the University of Washington's design program. He was the top of the class in architecture. She was the quiet one who always stayed late in the studio. Michael, she said, brushing her hands on her apron. I thought that was you, he smiled. I walked past and saw the lights, and you. Working like you always did. Emily laughed, nervous. You remember that? Of course, he said. You were always the one turning trash into art. They talked for nearly an hour. Michael now worked at a boutique architecture firm in downtown Seattle. He was helping design sustainable housing for low-income families. He admired her work on the cafe, and when she shyly mentioned the wedding gig, his eyes lit up. I'd love to see it, he said. Let me know if you need help lifting or building anything. You know I still owe you for that time you saved my final project. Emily smiled, remembering. She had once stayed up all night with him regluing parts of his cardboard model after someone knocked it over. He'd never forgotten. The night before the wedding, Emily barely slept. Her car was packed with decorations, and Michael had offered to drive the second load. Linda had hugged her tightly. I've seen a lot of people walk through these doors, but you, Emily, you're special, she said. No matter what happens tomorrow, remember that this is your beginning, not your end. Emily wiped her eyes. Thank you, Linda, for everything. The wedding took place in a lush garden on the edge of town. The sun peeked through the trees, casting golden light over the ceremony space. Emily worked quietly but efficiently, placing the floral arrangements, adjusting the chairs, hanging the lights. When the guests arrived, there were gasps of admiration. This is so charming. Who did all this? It's like walking into a fairy tale. Emily stayed in the background, watching. When the bride walked down the aisle, tears in her eyes, and the soft music played, Emily felt something in her chest shift. She had created beauty. She had made something real. After the ceremony, Marissa pulled her aside. I already have 2 more events I want to bring you in on. Are you interested? Emily nodded, trying to hide the tremble in her hands. Yes, absolutely. That night, Michael and Emily sat on the grass, watching the stars. The venue had emptied, but they'd stayed behind to help clean up. You know, Michael said, I think your parents would be proud. Emily looked up. You remember them? I met them once. They came to your end-of-year showcase. Your dad cried when he saw your paper lantern display. She smiled softly. He always believed in me, even when I didn't. Michael looked at her, thoughtful. You've come a long way, not just in career, but as a person. You shine now. Emily felt her cheeks warm. The old Emily might have deflected the compliment, but now she accepted it. Thank you, she said. I feel like I'm finally starting to become who I was always meant to be. Chapter 4, Echoes Across Town. Emily Tran stood behind the counter of Sunlight Brew, arranging a new stack of handmade business cards in a small ceramic dish she'd crafted herself. The cards were modest, just her name, Emily Tran Sustainable Event and Interior Design, and her email. Still, they felt like a declaration. I'm here. I'm real. It had been 3 weeks since the wedding, and the ripple effects were finally reaching the shore. Her inbox was filling with inquiries, small events, home consultations, even a local boutique asking for a seasonal display. Marissa had referred her to multiple clients, praising her creativity and reliability. Emily was cautious, careful not to take on more than she could handle, but each new message was a small flame reigniting her confidence. Linda had cleared a corner of the cafe and let her set up a makeshift studio, nothing grand, just a drafting table, a corkboard of sketches, and a shelf of materials. But to Emily, it was a kingdom. Michael came by almost every weekend now, helping with more technical builds, custom arches, wooden signs, even a miniature fountain centerpiece for an engagement party. They worked quietly, sometimes speaking, sometimes just listening to the soft jazz playing in the background. And yet, amidst all the growth and brightness, Emily couldn't stop wondering, where was Brandon now? The answer came one afternoon, entirely by accident. Emily had stopped by a thrift store to pick up old frames for a gallery wall project. As she browsed the aisles, she noticed a tall man wearing a faded blue jacket hunched over in the electronics section. There was something familiar in the curve of his shoulders. She moved closer, her heart beginning to pound. It was Brandon. He looked different, thinner. His skin was dull, his hair unkempt, and the expression on his face, gone was the confident smirk, replaced by a mixture of exhaustion and quiet defeat. Emily turned quickly, hoping to avoid him, but it was too late. "Emily," he called. She paused, then turned back slowly. "Brandon." They stood facing each other, a strange silence stretching between them. It had been nearly 5 months since the day he kicked her out of their parents' home. "You look well," he said, voice low. "You don't." She replied honestly, then regretted it. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "No, you're right," he said, letting out a bitter laugh. "I'm not." Things fell apart fast. She waited. "I lost the condo in LA. The investors pulled out. Turns out Dad had taken out loans against the business. More than I realized. I tried to hold it all together, but I wasn't ready. I thought I was, but I wasn't." Emily's stomach twisted. So, it was true, what Mr. Shepherd hadn't said outright. Their parents had tried to shield them from the company's slow collapse. "I live in a shared apartment now. Just found a part-time job at a warehouse. Nights. Pays just enough to eat." He looked up at her then, for the first time not as her older brother. Not as the man who took everything, but as someone lost. "I know I don't deserve to ask," Brandon said, "but if there's anything at all, do you know anyone who's hiring?" Emily took a breath. Her chest tightened, old hurt clashing with the compassion that still lived somewhere in her. She could walk away, but she didn't want to carry that weight forever. "I don't have a position," she said, "but I know someone who might." That evening, back at the cafe, she spoke to Linda. "He's my brother," Emily explained, "and he made my life hell for a while. But I also think he's finally been humbled. If there's a way for him to work, not as charity, but for real, I think it could help him." Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll give him one shot. Just like I gave you. But no hand-holding." Emily nodded. "That's all I ask." Brandon's first shift at Sunlight Brew was awkward. He wore an old polo shirt and avoided eye contact with everyone. He moved slowly, clearly unused to cleaning tables or taking orders. More than once, he tried to optimize the process like a corporate analyst, only to be gently corrected by Linda. Emily didn't hover. Instead, she worked at her design station, silently watching her brother fumble and learn. One afternoon, she caught him staring at the cafe's new decor, the wall installation she had made of driftwood and glass, the warm-toned lighting. The small framed quote above the register, "Build a life you don't need a vacation from." He turned to her, genuinely curious. "You did all this?" She nodded, piece by piece. Brandon didn't say anything for a moment. Then, quietly, "I never thought you'd make it after Dad passed. I thought you were too soft." Emily let the words settle. "Maybe I was. Or maybe I just had to start over the hard way to find what I really wanted." He nodded. "I'm sorry, Emily. For everything." She looked at him, not with anger. Not with forgiveness yet, but with a calm neutrality. "I don't need you to say sorry, Brandon. I just need you to work." He smiled faintly. "That I can do." Chapter 5. Brick by Brick. Brandon arrived 15 minutes early for his second week of work at Sunlight Brew. He still fumbled with the espresso machine and occasionally forgot which muffins were gluten-free. But he was learning. Quietly. Methodically. No longer with the arrogance of a former executive, but with the humility of someone rebuilding himself brick by brick. Linda kept a close eye but gave no special treatment. "Wipe the counter, Brandon," she'd say sharply if he missed a spot. "And smile. You're not delivering a eulogy." He took it all in stride. He didn't complain, didn't argue. For once, he listened. Emily watched from a distance, balancing two worlds, her growing design business and the cautious re-entry of her brother into her life. The boundaries were clear. She didn't offer him money. She didn't invite him into her personal space. But she offered him the same chance she had once been given, a place to begin again. Her own schedule had become a whirlwind of meetings, crafting sessions, and deliveries. In just 2 months, she had taken on 3 weddings, a baby shower, and 2 seasonal shop displays for local boutiques. Word of mouth was spreading fast, and with each successful project, her self-doubt shrank a little more. She had recently renamed her business. Root and Rise, Sustainable Design by Emily Tran. It felt fitting, like her story. One Tuesday afternoon, as she was working in the back patio, sanding reclaimed wood for an autumn-themed display, Brandon walked up holding 2 iced coffees. "I figured you'd forget lunch again," he said, setting one beside her. She glanced up, surprised. "Thanks." He sat down across from her, looking around the patio she'd transformed with vines, vintage chairs, and candle lanterns. "You really built something," he said quietly. Emily didn't reply. Brandon fidgeted with the coffee straw. "I used to think success was only about how much you owned. Cars, property, a big title next to your name. But it's not, is it?" She looked at him now, really looked. He still wore that same stubborn jawline and guarded eyes, but something had shifted. The weight of pride was slowly lifting. "No," she said. "Success is waking up and wanting to live the day you're in." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking," he added, "about going back to school. Maybe part-time. Get certified in something that matters. I don't know yet. Marketing was never the problem, it was me. The way I used it." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Not a bad idea." There was a long pause. Then he said, "You don't have to forgive me, Em. I know I don't deserve that. But thank you for not turning your back." She looked away, then back at him. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I don't want to carry bitterness the rest of my life." That night, she went home and cried, not because she was sad, but because she finally felt free. Later that month, a local lifestyle magazine reached out. They had heard about Root and Rise through the boutique owners and wanted to do a small feature on local women transforming Seattle through art and design. Emily almost said no, but Michael convinced her. "You've spent so long hiding in the shadows," he said over dinner one night. "Maybe it's time the world saw what I've always seen." The article came out in mid-November. The title read, "From Rock Bottom to Root and Rise, Emily Tran's Journey of Redemption and Design." It included pictures of her cafe installations, weddings, and even her back patio workspace. The story was raw and honest. She didn't hide her past, her family fallout, or the nights she slept in her car. And perhaps that's what made the article resonate with so many people. Messages flooded in. Strangers thanking her for sharing. Clients wanting to work with her. One even called her the quiet storm Seattle didn't see coming. Brandon read the article 3 times. He didn't say much afterward, just left a note on her desk. "You didn't just rebuild your life. You built a bridge for others, too." Thanksgiving came quietly. Linda hosted a small dinner at the cafe for her cafe family. Just 10 people. Candles. Home-cooked food. Soft laughter filling the room. Emily sat next to Michael, who now held her hand like it had always belonged there. Brandon sat across from them, smiling more easily now, carrying trays and cracking small jokes. There were no speeches, no grand declarations. But when Linda raised a toast and said, "To second chances," everyone nodded a little too hard. After dinner, as Emily stepped outside to feel the night air, Brandon followed her. He looked up at the stars. "You think Mom and Dad would be proud of you?" he asked. She smiled softly. "I don't know, but I'm proud of me." He nodded. "I'm starting to want to feel that too." She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in hugs or apologies. Sometimes it comes in doing better. One day at a time. Brick by brick. Chapter 6. The Offer. Rain fell gently over Seattle that morning, casting the city in shades of gray and silver. Inside, sunlight brew. The warm hum of espresso machines and quiet jazz offered shelter from the cold drizzle outside. Emily sat at her design corner, reviewing fabric swatches for an upcoming winter-themed wedding, when her phone buzzed with a notification. Subject: Collaboration Proposal, Greenhouse Collective. She nearly dismissed it as spam, until she saw the sender's name, Layla Bryant, founder of one of the fastest-growing sustainable design cooperatives in the Pacific Northwest. Greenhouse Collective was known for marrying eco-conscious architecture with community-focused projects. Emily had followed their work for years, admiring from afar, never imagining they'd know her name. She opened the email. Dear Emily, I recently came across your feature in Seattle Living. Your philosophy, aesthetic, and story deeply moved me. At Greenhouse Collective, we're preparing to launch a new project, an eco-event venue just outside the city. And we're searching for a lead designer with vision and grit. Would you be open to a meeting this week? Warmly, Layla Bryant. Emily stared at the screen, heart racing. It felt too big, too fast. But also, like everything she'd quietly been building toward. 2 days later, she found herself in the heart of Fremont. Inside Greenhouse's sunlit studio, surrounded by sketches of open-air greenhouses, hand-woven chairs, and reclaimed wood designs. Layla was exactly as Emily had imagined, sharp-eyed, energetic, and dressed in a flowing linen coat that somehow felt like both fashion and a mission statement. We're creating a multi-purpose eco-venue, Layla explained, walking her through scale models. Weddings, pop-ups, workshops, all rooted in sustainable design. But we want it to feel personal, like a story being told. Your work has that. Emily was stunned. You want me to lead it? Yes, Layla said, smiling. We want your fingerprints on everything, from materials to mood boards. Emily swallowed. That's huge. Layla raised a hand. You're not just anything. You're the girl who turned a coffee shop into a sanctuary and her trauma into art. That's exactly what we need. Emily's throat tightened. I'll need time to think, she whispered. Layla nodded. Of course, but not too long. The world moves fast. That evening, Emily sat at the back patio of the cafe, sketching in silence as soft rain tapped the canvas awning. Michael arrived after work. Still in his blazer, his tie loosened. She handed him the letter. He read it carefully, eyebrows rising. This is big, he said. I know, she replied. Too big. He looked at her. Not for you. But what about Root and Rise? And Linda? And Brandon? Michael smiled. Your business can grow. Linda will be proud, not abandoned. And Brandon, he needs to build his own foundation. Not stay standing on yours. Emily sighed. I'm scared. He reached for her hand. You've been scared before. But you still showed up. Every day. That's what courage looks like. Later that night, Emily found Brandon closing out the register. He looked up, surprised at her serious expression. You okay? He asked. I have to tell you something, she said. I've been offered a job. A huge one. Outside the city. It would mean spending less time here. He was silent for a moment. Are you going to take it? I think so, she said. I just didn't want you to find out from someone else. Brandon leaned on the counter. You're not abandoning anyone, Emily. You earned this. She blinked. You're not upset? He gave her a half smile. If you told me this 6 months ago, I probably would have said you were dreaming. Now, I think you're finally living. She felt a lump form in her throat. Just promise me one thing, he added. What's that? When you're designing that place, make sure there's one corner with a worn wooden bench. So some guy like me, down on his luck, can sit there and feel like the world isn't over yet. Emily smiled, tears pricking her eyes. Deal. 2 weeks later, she signed the contract. The transition wouldn't be instant. She'd spend the next few months commuting between Seattle and the new site. But her life had changed. Her scope had changed. And Brandon, well, he had started taking online courses in hospitality and business ethics. He was still clumsy behind the counter. But now customers laughed with him instead of at him. Linda even offered him a permanent part-time position, and he accepted it with genuine gratitude. On her first official day with Greenhouse Collective, Emily stood at the edge of an open field that would one day become a haven of community and celebration. She closed her eyes and imagined it all: hanging vines, light filtering through reclaimed glass, the soft murmur of joy in every corner. And somewhere, a wooden bench. For someone who needed it. Chapter 7. Temptations and Tipping Points. Brandon Tran stood behind the counter at Sunlight Brew, his apron dusted with flour from the blueberry scones he had just taken out of the oven. The smell wafted through the cafe, cozy and familiar. A couple of regulars offered nods of appreciation as they picked up their morning coffee. He smiled back, genuinely. It had been nearly 3 months since Emily gave him that second chance. He still didn't fully understand why. He hadn't earned her forgiveness. Not really. But each shift, each scrubbed mugs, each small laugh from a customer felt like a brick added to a foundation he never thought he'd build. And yet, deep down, something gnawed at him. Was this it? He wasn't ungrateful. But he couldn't help wondering if this new life, simple, structured, quiet, was what he was meant for. Especially after who he used to be. A manager. A negotiator. A man in control. That morning, as he took out the trash, he found a stranger waiting by the alley, tall, in a charcoal suit, expensive watch glinting beneath the Seattle sun. Brandon Tran. The man asked. Brandon froze. Yeah? The man extended a card. Marcus Dillon, regional recruiter. Ventura Hospitality Group. Brandon's eyebrows lifted. He knew that name. Ventura ran high-end hotel chains and event venues all over the West Coast. I saw your name mentioned in Seattle Living, Marcus continued smoothly. You used to handle marketing for Tran Design. Correct. Brandon nodded slowly, unsure. We're opening a new luxury event venue in Tacoma. We're looking for consultants. Temporary at first, maybe long-term if it fits. We need people who know branding, hospitality, and growth strategy. Brandon blinked. Why me? You've worked in design-adjacent fields. You've had leadership roles. You're local. And frankly, Marcus leaned in. I hear your sister is working with Greenhouse Collective now. It doesn't hurt to have someone with that connection. There it was. The undertone. This wasn't just about him. You'd start with a few planning meetings, Marcus added. 2 evenings a week. We pay $600 per session. Just your ideas. No strings. Unless you want more later. Brandon stared at the card. I'll think about it, he said. Back inside, he felt something strange brewing, excitement. Yes, but also guilt. He hadn't told Emily. And for the first time since starting over, he wasn't sure what the right move was. Meanwhile, miles away at the future site of the Glass Meadow, Greenhouse Collective's upcoming eco-venue, Emily stood ankle-deep in dirt, reviewing a pallet of reclaimed wood with the carpentry team. The pace was exhilarating. Her designs were no longer concepts on paper. They were becoming walls, staircases, archways. She made real-time decisions, adjusted lighting angles, and coordinated contractors. She had never felt more alive and more out of her depth. Layla, though supportive, didn't sugarcoat things. This is a $4 million project, Emily. She reminded her one morning. It will take every ounce of creativity and every grain of grit you've got. Emily nodded, pushing back her exhaustion. Most nights, she worked until 1 a.m. drafting plans, emailing vendors, revising orders. Weekends were spent bouncing between the construction site and her small but growing team at Root and Rise. The two worlds tugged at her constantly, her heart stretched between past and future. That Sunday, Emily returned to Seattle for a short visit and walked into Sunlight Brew for a surprise inspection, half out of love, half out of habit. She found Brandon chatting casually with customers, apron on. Laughter in his voice. Linda gave her a proud nod. "He's been steady," she said. "No complaints. He even fixed the broken light in the pantry last week." Emily smiled. "I think he's starting to find his rhythm." That evening, after the cafe closed, Brandon invited her to walk along the waterfront. It was their first real conversation outside of work in months. They sat on a bench overlooking the Sound, wrapped in scarves and silence. "There's something I need to tell you," Brandon said finally. Emily turned to him, curious. "I was approached by someone from Ventura," he said. "They want me to consult for their new venue." Emily's body tensed slightly. "Ventura? They're a direct competitor." "I know. That's why I'm telling you," he said quickly. "It's just a few sessions. And I need the money. But more than that, I miss feeling like my voice matters." Emily didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "Do you believe in what they're building?" Brandon hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. It's flashy, corporate, pretty, but maybe shallow." "Then why are you considering it?" "Because it reminds me of who I used to be," he said softly. "Before I screwed everything up." Emily looked at him, not as an enemy, not even as a brother, but as a man at a fork in the road. "You have every right to say yes," she said. "You don't owe me anything." Brandon's jaw tightened. "But I do." "No," she said gently. "You owe yourself honesty. If this is a step forward, take it. If it's a step back into the person you ran from, then you already know the answer." Brandon looked away, then down at the business card in his hand. He tore it in half. "I don't want to just be someone important," he said. "I want to be someone better." Emily smiled, her eyes misting. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you already are." Chapter 8. Foundations Shaken. It began with a phone call. Emily was at the construction site of the glass meadow, finalizing the layout for the outdoor reception area. Her hands were dusted with soil and marker ink as she sketched updates directly onto the blueprint when her phone buzzed. Layla Bryant. "Hey, Emily." Layla's voice was clipped but calm, the way a pilot might sound before announcing turbulence. "We've hit a snag." Emily stood up straighter. "What kind of snag?" "There's been a zoning complaint filed against the project," Layla said. Anonymous. Claims we're violating local environmental ordinances. The city's sending a compliance officer this week. Emily's heart skipped. "But we're within all guidelines. We triple-checked." "I know. And I trust your work. But even false complaints slow things down. Worst case, it could freeze progress for weeks while they investigate." Emily clenched her jaw. The glass meadow had already begun to feel like a living, breathing extension of her heart. The idea of it stalled, trapped in bureaucratic limbo, was unbearable. "Do you think it's Ventura?" Emily asked. Layla hesitated. "I can't say. But they're opening a similar venue 30 miles south. And we've been pulling attention from some of their big-name vendors." Emily thought of Brandon. Of how close he'd come to working with them. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow," she said. Back in Seattle that evening, Brandon sat with Linda after closing time, sipping coffee. He was showing her a mock-up of a new loyalty card program he'd designed for the cafe, his first step into rebuilding the marketing instincts he once buried. "That's actually smart," Linda said. Surprised. "Very on brand for us." "I'm not totally useless," Brandon smirked. Before she could respond, a tall woman in a red coat walked in, even though the lights were dimmed. She looked around, then approached the counter. "I'm looking for Brandon Tran," she said. Brandon stood cautiously. "That's me." She extended her hand. "Vivian Liu, Regional Operations Director at Ventura Hospitality." Brandon froze. We heard you turned down our initial offer, she continued, smiling. Respectable. Loyal. But I wanted to speak to you directly. Linda stepped in. We're closed. Vivian didn't flinch. Then I'll be quick. She turned back to Brandon. We're not offering you a consultancy this time. We're offering you management. Lead position. Full salary. Stock options. And complete autonomy to run our Tacoma site. Brandon's throat dried. Why me? You know the local market. You understand customer experience. And you've got connections we'd like to tap into whether you realize it or not. Brandon looked at Linda, then back at Vivian. You mean Emily? Vivian smiled politely. She's made waves. You can too. She handed him an envelope. Offers good until Friday. Then she left. Linda said nothing for a long moment. Then finally, you okay? Brandon's hand gripped the envelope. I don't know. The next morning, Emily arrived at the site an hour before the compliance officer. She wore jeans and work boots, her hair tied back, blueprints tucked under one arm. The misty air hung low around the trees that bordered the property. The officer, a young man named Jake Hughes, was professional but friendly. I'll be honest, Ms. Tran, he said as they walked. This doesn't look like a violation. But we still have to follow procedure. Someone's invested a lot into making this a headache for you. Emily nodded. I understand. He walked the grounds, measuring buffer zones, checking drainage plans, reviewing environmental impact reports. After 2 hours, he closed his binder. You've done everything right, he said. I'll file the report by Friday. You should be cleared to continue. Emily let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Thank you. But keep your eyes open, Jake added. Someone out there doesn't want this place to open on time. That evening, as she returned to the cafe, Brandon was waiting for her in the back patio, hands in his jacket pockets. She could tell immediately that something was off. He handed her the envelope. Emily opened it. Inside was a full offer letter from Ventura, 6-figure salary, executive benefits, and a clause requesting confidentiality about any known conflicts of interest. Her face tightened. You told them no, she said, not asking but hoping. I haven't told them anything yet. He replied. I wanted to tell you first. Her heart sank. I turned them down once, he continued. But this time, it's not a side gig. It's a career. And you think they're clean? She asked. That they didn't file the complaint? That this isn't some twisted chess move? Brandon's silence was answer enough. Emily stepped back. I gave you a place to start over, she said softly. Not to circle back to the same people who... I know, Brandon said. That's why I haven't signed. I don't want to go back to who I was. Then don't. I want to be more, he whispered. But I also want to believe I can build something of my own, not just serve coffee and sweep floors. Emily's voice trembled. Then find a way to build that doesn't burn down the people who helped you. He nodded, eyes filled with shame. I'll decide by tomorrow, he said. That night, Brandon sat alone in his small apartment, the offer letter on the table. He stared at it for a long time. Then he took a lighter from his drawer, lit the edge of the paper, watched it curl, blacken, and vanish. Chapter 9. A blank page. The following week, the glass meadow was quiet again. Construction had resumed after the compliance scare, but progress was slower. Delays with material shipments, miscommunications with contractors, and mounting pressure from greenhouse's investors made every day feel like a balancing act. Emily felt the pressure acutely. She sat in her temporary on-site studio, a refurbished shipping container converted into an office, surrounded by samples of wood, stone, and lighting fixtures. Her sketchpad lay open, but the page remained blank. For the first time in months, she couldn't draw. It wasn't that she lacked ideas. There were plenty. But none of them felt right. Nothing seemed to align with the vision she had started with. Somewhere in the blur of logistics, meetings, and media attention, she'd lost the pulse of the project. The soul. What is this place supposed to feel like? She thought. Not just look like, but feel? She closed her eyes and tried to remember what it had felt like in the beginning. Bare soil. The wind in the grass. A dream of warmth and welcome. A place where no one was left outside. And then, quietly, the image came to her. A long communal table made from salvaged wood. No two chairs alike, vines hanging from reclaimed beams. Candles in upcycled glass. A corner reading nook filled with books people left behind. And yes, that bench. The one she'd promised Brandon. She opened her eyes and began to draw. Meanwhile, back in Seattle, Brandon paced the floor of his tiny apartment, holding a spiral notebook. On the first page, he had scribbled a title. Kind Start, Career Programs for Formerly Incarcerated Youth. It was an idea that had taken root the moment he burned Ventura's offer. Something about rejecting that path had clarified what he didn't want, but also what he might want to build. He remembered a young man who had come into Sunlight Brew a few weeks back, tattoos up his neck, head low, voice barely above a whisper when he asked for a job. Linda had told him gently, "We don't have the staff space right now, but I hope you keep looking." Brandon had watched him walk away with slumped shoulders and something else, shame. That had stuck with him. He wasn't a therapist. He wasn't a philanthropist. But he had time. He had business experience. And he had something else, a second chance that someone else had given him. What if he could help pay it forward? He reached out to Linda that afternoon. "I have an idea," he said. "It's small, half-formed, but maybe worth something." She listened. Carefully. When he finished, she nodded once. "Write a proposal," she said. "I'll help you shape it." Back at the Meadow, Emily was once again in motion. Her sketches had come to life, first in pencil, then in timber. She stood next to the crew as they installed a vine-wrapped archway she'd designed for the main gathering space. Michael had helped her source the right plants, and now he was beside her again, sleeves rolled up, face glowing from the sun. "You found your rhythm again," he said. She nodded. "I just had to stop trying to impress everyone and remember who I was designing for." "For them?" he asked, pointing toward the imaginary guests. She smiled. "For the ones who don't get invited anywhere else." Michael paused, looking at her with something more than admiration. "You ever think about what comes after this?" he asked quietly. Emily turned to him. "What do you mean?" "This place is just one project. But what's your future look like?" She hesitated. "I don't know yet," she said. "I just know it's not about running. Not anymore." He nodded. "Good," he said. "Because I'm tired of being in the background." She blinked. "Michael. I don't mean romantically," he added quickly, though his smile betrayed something softer. "I just mean, maybe next time we build something together. From day one." She laughed, touched. "Deal." That night, Emily returned to the cafe. Brandon was sitting at a corner table, laptop open, papers spread around. She hadn't seen him this focused in years. He looked up. Hey. They sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. "Layla told me we're back on track. We might open 2 weeks early." "That's incredible," Brandon said. "You deserve that." She glanced at the papers. "What's all this?" He hesitated, then slid one across the table. "Program outline. Kind Start." As she read through the pages, structured mentorship, job skills training, small business internships, her eyes widened. "You wrote this?" "I had help," he said. "Linda, a friend at the community college, but the idea's mine." She looked up. "Brandon, this is amazing." "I've always thought I needed to rebuild my name," he said. "Turns out, helping someone else build theirs feels better." Emily smiled. "I'm proud of you," she said. Brandon's voice caught. "That means more than you know." Chapter 10. The Voice Within. Emily adjusted the collar of her blouse for the third time, her fingers slightly trembling. The community hall was already half full, the hum of voices echoing off the high ceilings as people gathered for the Green Futures panel, a regional event showcasing sustainable development leaders in Washington. She had been invited by Layla to speak about the glass meadow, now just weeks from opening. The project had gained quiet traction, blog features, a local news segment, even a request from a wedding magazine. But standing on a stage in front of dozens of architects, designers, and city planners? This was different. She peeked around the curtain and spotted Michael sitting in the third row, smiling reassuringly. Next to him was Linda, arms crossed with her usual calm confidence. Brandon was there, too, holding a small notebook. Layla appeared at Emily's side, tablet in hand. "You don't have to impress anyone," she said. "Just tell the truth. Tell your story." That was the hard part. Emily didn't see herself as a public speaker. She still carried the weight of those early nights, sleeping in her car, the sting of Brandon's betrayal, the years of being overlooked and dismissed. Who was she to talk about vision and leadership? Still, when her name was called, she stepped onto the stage. Applause. Lights. Silence. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I didn't start with blueprints or funding," she said. "I started with nothing, and sometimes, nothing is the best place to begin." She told them about Sunlight Brew, about Linda, about being handed a rag and a dish sponge instead of a resume. She spoke of driftwood and chalkboards, of sketches done in silence, of finding her purpose not in perfection, but in persistence. When she described the glass meadow, she didn't talk about construction timelines or budget spreadsheets. She talked about benches. "Every space I design has a bench," she said. "Because there was a time when I needed one just to rest, just to think, just to believe I still had a place in this world." By the time she finished, the room was quiet again, but not empty. Several people rose to their feet. Applause echoed louder this time. Emily blinked against the lights, overwhelmed. Backstage, Layla hugged her. That, she whispered, was leadership. Later that night, Brandon stood outside the cafe with Emily, both holding steaming cups of tea. "You crushed it," he said. She gave a small smile. "You were right in the front row. No pressure." He chuckled. Still, impressive. There was a pause. "I want to help you," Emily said. With kind start. Brandon blinked. "Really? You helped me get here. It's my turn to lift someone else." He exhaled slowly, touched. "I was going to ask if I could run a pilot program out of the cafe, weekend workshops for young adults transitioning out of the system. Job prep, interview skills, barista training. Very small scale." Emily nodded. "I love it. I just need funding," Brandon added. "Every grant I've applied to wants a proven track record. We're still just a name on paper." Emily tapped her chin. "You know, the Glass Meadow has a community engagement clause. They want to host nonprofit workshops as part of the launch. What if Kind Start ran its pilot series there?" Brandon's eyes lit up. "You're serious?" "Completely. We help each other. Like we should have always done." 1 week later, Brandon and Emily presented Kind Start at the Meadow to the greenhouse board. Layla sat at the head of the table, tapping a pen thoughtfully as Brandon finished his pitch. "It's a grassroots concept," he said, closing his notebook. "But it's rooted in real need. We don't want handouts. We want a chance to prove that given the right tools, people can choose better." Layla looked at both siblings for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Approved," she said. Brandon's hands clenched at his sides in disbelief. "There's one condition," she added. "I want you to bring one graduate of the program to speak at the Meadow's grand opening next month." "Done," Brandon said without hesitation. That weekend, back at the cafe, Brandon posted the first flyer for Kind Start. Looking for a new beginning? Free workshops, no judgment, real skills, hosted by people who've been there. He watched as a young woman in a faded hoodie paused at the window, reading it closely. He stepped outside. "Hey," he said gently. "You looking for something?" She hesitated. "Is that flyer real?" Or one of those fake charity things? Brandon smiled. It's real. I'll be teaching. Want to talk about it inside? She nodded slowly. He held the door open for her. As she stepped in, Emily caught the moment from across the cafe and smiled to herself. Chapter 11. Ghosts in the Garden. 2 weeks before the grand opening of the glass meadow, the site was buzzing with energy. Final touches were being installed, canopies draped with soft linen, handmade lanterns hung like glowing fruit from the trees, and reclaimed wood signs pointed towards ceremony spaces, gardens, and the community pavilion. Emily walked the grounds with her clipboard, ticking boxes, her face glowing with a sense of calm urgency. It was happening. All of it. Not a dream or a sketch, but real. Michael caught up to her near the entrance archway. You haven't eaten today, he said, holding out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. I had a protein bar, she replied, eyes still on her notes. That's not food, that's an apology in wrapper form. She laughed, finally looking at him. Okay, thanks. As they sat down on the newly built bench under a willow tree, the bench she had promised Brandon, Emily allowed herself a rare pause. For once, she felt whole. But the peace wouldn't last. Later that afternoon, Emily returned to her temporary studio to find a letter resting on her desk. No envelope. No return address. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting hit her like a gust of icy wind. You really think this makes up for everything you took? There was no signature. No explanation. But she recognized the handwriting. Vanessa Kim. Her ex-business partner. The only person who'd ever accused her publicly, falsely, of stealing designs in college. The scandal that had derailed Emily's academic future, pushed her out of competitions, and cost her a scholarship. She had walked away rather than fight, too ashamed, too quiet. And now she was back? Emily's hands trembled as she reread the note. That night, she confided in Michael. She hated that I got recognition, Emily whispered, staring at the letter on the cafe table. She always wanted the spotlight. She couldn't stand that I designed differently, more emotionally. Michael frowned. Do you think she filed the zoning complaint? I wouldn't put it past her. Should we tell Layla? Emily shook her head. Not yet. I don't want to stir anything unless I'm sure. Maybe it's just a scare tactic. Michael leaned closer. Then let's find out. I have contacts at the licensing office. If she's involved, we'll know. Meanwhile, Brandon's first kind start session began in a shaded corner of the Glass Meadows community space. Folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a simple sign. Start where you are. Only 3 people showed up. A young woman named Jazz, barely 20, hoodie zipped to her chin. A soft-spoken man in his 30s named Milo, recently released from a correctional facility, and a tall teen named Dante, who didn't say a word the entire session. Brandon didn't try to impress them. He just told the truth. I was handed everything once, he said, and I threw it away. It wasn't until I was mopping floors that I realized I liked the person I was becoming. Jazz folded her arms. Sounds nice. But what if you don't even have a floor to mop? Brandon smiled gently. Then we build one together. By the end of the hour, only Dante lingered. Brandon approached cautiously. You okay? Dante looked down, then pulled something from his pocket. A folded eviction notice. My mom got sick. I dropped out of school to work. Didn't go well. I've been couch surfing for months. Brandon took a breath. You showed up today. That's something. That's everything. Dante looked up for the first time. Can you help? Brandon didn't hesitate. Yes. The next day, Emily stood in front of Layla's desk with the letter in hand. I wasn't going to bring this up, she said. But I think someone's trying to disrupt the opening. Layla read the note in silence, then looked up. Do you have proof of who it is? No, Emily admitted. But I have a history with her. Layla leaned back. This is your project, Emily. If you want me to act, I will. But only if you're sure. Emily folded the letter slowly. I need more time. Layla nodded. Then take it. And if she tries anything else, we push back. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold across the lawn of the glass meadow, Emily walked alone to the willow bench, the place she had envisioned as a refuge. She found a single wildflower tucked between the wood slats. Not from Michael. Not from Brandon. No note. No explanation. Just a reminder. Someone was watching. She didn't know if it was a warning or a message of forgiveness. But either way, the past had returned. And this time, she wasn't running from it. Chapter 12. Lines in the dirt. Emily arrived at the glass meadow early the next morning, only to find chaos. The signage she and her team had spent 2 weeks hand-painting had been defaced, spray paint scrawled across the main archway, chairs overturned, wildflowers trampled. The vines that adorned the ceremonial path had been ripped down, left in tangled piles. She froze. Her chest tightened. It wasn't vandalism from strangers. It was intentional. Targeted. Michael arrived seconds later, breath catching as he took in the damage. Emily. She didn't speak. She just walked forward, slowly, deliberately, and picked up one of the signs. The paint was fresh. It bled through her fingertips. Call the contractor, she said. And Layla. Michael nodded. And the police? She hesitated. Then shook her head. Not yet. This wasn't about arresting someone. This was about facing someone. Later that afternoon, Emily stood alone outside a cafe in Capitol Hill. Her fingers tapped nervously on her phone. The name on the screen, Vanessa Kim. They hadn't spoken in years, but Emily had found her, through mutual friends, through industry rumors. Vanessa had moved back to Seattle last fall, working in corporate interior branding. Quiet. Out of the spotlight. Until now. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed in a blazer too stiff for the late summer heat. Her hair pulled back. Her eyes unreadable. You called, Vanessa said coolly, sliding into the chair across from Emily. I assume you've heard what happened at my site. Vanessa tilted her head. Vandalism? Tragic. Emily kept her voice steady. I know it was you. I think you want to believe that, Vanessa replied, folding her hands. But I've moved on. Unlike you. Emily's jaw tightened. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you. Whatever grudge you think you're carrying, it ends here. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Vanessa laughed softly. You never fought back, Emily. You walked away when I accused you of copying my portfolio. You let the school bury your application. You let me win. I let you have something that wasn't worth destroying myself for. Emily said calmly. I thought that was the high road. But maybe I should have stood up then. So I'm doing it now. Vanessa's smile faded. You've built something good, she said, surprisingly honest. I saw the article. I saw what you've done with the glass meadow. You're finally the name people remember. I didn't do it to be remembered, Emily said. I did it to build something no one could take from me. Vanessa looked down at her coffee. Then what do you want from me now? A confession? Closure. Emily stood up. I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. And if you try again, if you even touch what I'm building, then yes, I will go to the police. And I will speak. Not just for myself, but for every quiet designer you stepped on to stay on top. Vanessa didn't reply. Emily left her there, still staring into the dark surface of her untouched drink. Back at the glass meadow. Cleanup was already underway. Volunteers had arrived after Brandon posted an open call on social media. Designers don't retreat, he had written. They rebuild. By sunset, the path was clear. The signs repainted. The flowers replanted. Dante, Jazz, and Milo, Brandon's Kind Start crew, had shown up too, lifting, painting, laughing. For the first time, they felt part of something bigger than themselves. As Emily arrived, Brandon waved her over. Hey boss, he said playfully. You good? She nodded. Better now. Then she turned to Dante. Thanks for helping. I mean that. He shrugged. I didn't have anything else to do. Brandon raised an eyebrow. What about that recruiter from Barrow Foods? Didn't he call you again? Dante's face shifted. He offered a signing bonus. Said I could skip all this nonprofit stuff and make cash quick. Brandon stepped forward. Dante, you know they're just looking for cheap labor. No benefits. No growth. I know, Dante said. But it's hard to say no when you've got nothing. Emily looked at Brandon, watched his face fall just slightly, and then he did something Emily hadn't seen him do in years. He pulled the keys from his pocket. Dante, you're going to run the new pop-up coffee booth at the Meadow. It's ours. You'll be paid. You'll learn everything I know. Dante blinked. Seriously? Brandon nodded. But only if you promise me one thing. What? You show up like you did today. You build this. Not for me, for yourself. Dante nodded, his voice quiet. Okay. Emily swallowed back the lump in her throat. Brandon had come a long way. That night, after everyone left, Emily sat on the willow bench. Her hands still dirty from planting vines. Michael joined her, carrying a box of candles. More ambience? She asked. No, he said, smiling. Just something to light the way. He placed a candle at her feet. Then another. And another. Dozens, lining the path from the entrance to the bench. She looked around in awe. It's beautiful, she whispered. He nodded. So are you. She didn't respond right away. But this time, she didn't pull away either. Chapter 13. The Meadow in Bloom. The morning of the grand opening arrived with golden light and a cool breeze. The kind of air that made everything feel possible. Emily stood at the edge of the glass meadow, her creation finally complete. The venue shimmered with subtle elegance, string lights woven into branches, tables built from repurposed oak, gentle music floating on the wind. From the ceremony arch to the community garden path, every corner carried her fingerprint. Guests were beginning to arrive, vendors, local officials, reporters, greenhouse investors, clients, neighbors. Dozens, maybe 100. It was more than she expected, more than she'd ever imagined. She was calm and terrified, still breathing. Michael whispered behind her. Barely, she replied, exhaling with a laugh. Are the speakers working? Check. Catering set. Seating's good. And Brandon's team is ready. She turned to him. He's really going to let Dante speak? He didn't let him. Dante insisted. Emily's eyebrows lifted. He wrote it last night, Michael added. Didn't show it to anyone. Emily looked toward the small wooden stage near the center of the garden where a mic had been set up. Brandon was adjusting the sound levels while Dante paced nearby, clutching a folded sheet of paper. Brandon caught Emily's eye, gave her a thumbs up. She smiled and nodded back. At noon, the opening ceremony began. Layla Bryant took the stage first, speaking of vision, sustainability, and the power of second chances. Her words were crisp and rehearsed, polished like the executive she was. She introduced Emily as a quiet force who turned memory into mission. When it was Emily's turn, the crowd hushed. She stood at the mic, eyes scanning the rows of expectant faces. But then she looked toward the trees, toward the bench under the willow, and let herself relax. I don't have a speech, she began. A few chuckles. I have a story. And so, she told it, briefly, honestly. Of starting with nothing, of kindness and grit, of benches and broken paths, of choosing to rebuild even when no one believed she could. This place, she finished, isn't just mine. It's yours. It's for anyone who ever needed a place to sit, to start, to breathe. Applause followed. Real, resonant applause. She stepped down, eyes misty. Layla returned to the mic, and now, a special guest. A voice from the very heart of our community work, someone who's already begun the next story. She gestured to the side of the stage. Dante Harris, from Kind Start. Emily's heart skipped. Brandon, standing just off stage, looked as tense as she'd ever seen him. Dante approached slowly, his hands shaking slightly. He unfolded his paper, took a breath. "My name is Dante," he said into the mic, voice low but steady. "I've been invisible most of my life. Not because I wanted to be, but because people didn't look." Silence settled over the meadow. "I'm 19. I dropped out of high school to help my mom when she got sick. I took jobs I didn't understand, with people who didn't care. I almost ended up in a place I couldn't come back from." He paused. Then someone gave me a flyer. He looked toward Brandon, who stood frozen, eyes wide. "I thought it was a scam. But I showed up. And someone gave me coffee and a job. But more than that, he gave me dignity." Brandon looked down, overcome. Dante continued, voice gaining strength. "Today, I'm working, learning, and I'll be the first in my family to get a professional certification next year, thanks to Kind Start and thanks to this place. The Glass Meadow." He held up his paper, then let it fall. "I don't need the words anymore," he said, "because I'm living it." The applause was thunderous. Brandon turned away, wiping his eyes. Emily moved to him, touched his shoulder. He meant every word. Brandon nodded, his voice rough. "I've never felt that kind of purpose." Emily whispered, "Welcome to building something real." The rest of the afternoon was filled with laughter, food, walking tours, and quiet moments beneath trees. The community garden attracted curious families. Children ran between wildflower beds. Couples sat on benches, holding hands. Michael wrapped an arm around Emily's waist as they strolled past the ceremony circle. "You did it." She leaned into him. "We did." Nearby, Brandon stood beside Dante, introducing him to a greenhouse board member. Jazz and Milo, also in their Kind Start t-shirts, helped serve pastries from the pop-up coffee booth. This wasn't just an event. It was a movement. As the sun dipped lower, casting warm gold across the meadow, Emily slipped away to her favorite place, the willow bench. She sat in silence, letting it all wash over her. The doubts, the memories, the little girl who used to draw on napkins, the young woman who had nowhere to sleep, the survivor. She heard footsteps behind her. "Vanessa." Emily tensed, but didn't stand. Vanessa approached slowly, something unreadable in her eyes. "I saw your speech," she said. "I thought it would hurt." Emily looked at her. "And did it?" Vanessa hesitated. "Only because it was beautiful." Emily offered a faint smile. "You could have had that too." Vanessa looked away. "I know." They sat in silence for a long moment before Vanessa turned to leave. This time, Emily didn't stop her. End of Chapter 13. In Chapter 14, a surprising business offer will put Emily at a crossroads between expansion and preserving her roots. Brandon will face his first crisis as a mentor when Dante's past resurfaces in a way that threatens everything they've built. Chapter 14. When roots are tested. The week after the grand opening of the Glass Meadow was a blur of interviews, emails, and new business inquiries. Emily's inbox exploded with messages from across the state, clients, event organizers, design publications. Everyone wanted a piece of what she had built. At first, it felt exhilarating. Then, overwhelming. One email stood out. Subject: Acquisition and Expansion Opportunity, Easton Events. Dear Ms. Tran, we are deeply impressed by your work with the Glass Meadow. Easton Events is a national brand seeking partnerships with visionary designers to open a series of eco-conscious venues across the country. We propose a joint venture with funding, staffing, and national exposure. You'd remain creative director, but with full-scale backing and immediate reach. Can we schedule a meeting? Best regards, Kara Duval, VP Strategic Partnerships. Easton Events. Emily read it twice, then again. It was everything she had once dreamed of. But something in her chest didn't sit right. That afternoon, as she walked through the glass meadow, she passed Dante and Jazz painting a new sign for the Kind Start corner. Come as you are. They waved, smiling. Emily waved back, but her mind was spinning. She found Brandon in the tool shed, sorting donation bins. Hey, she said softly. Got a minute? He looked up. Sure. What's up? She handed him her phone with the email. He read it, slowly, carefully, then handed it back without a word. I haven't responded, she said. Brandon sat on a stool, hands clasped. Do you want it? I don't know. Would you have said yes 6 months ago? In a heartbeat, she said honestly. But now, you built this from dirt, he said. You brought people like me, like Dante, into it. It's not just a venue. It's a voice. I know, she whispered. Expansion's not wrong, Brandon added. But losing yourself in it, that's what we used to do. She met his eyes. Then maybe I don't need their ladder. Maybe I just need to plant another tree. Meanwhile, Brandon had his own battle brewing. That evening, Dante didn't show up for his shift. By morning, he hadn't returned Brandon's texts. By noon, his phone went to voicemail. Jazz said she'd seen him get into a black car with tinted windows the day before, no explanation. Brandon's stomach dropped. He knew that car. Barrow Foods. He drove straight to the warehouse on the industrial edge of town. A security guard stopped him at the gate. I'm here to speak to Dante Harris, Brandon said. He's a minor, not on shift. The guard muttered. Maybe try the temp agency. Brandon clenched his fists. Let me in. I can't. Brandon pulled out his phone. Then I'll call the Department of Labor. And I'll tell them how you're using third-party contractors to recruit underage workers without guardian approval. The guard hesitated. Then, reluctantly, picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, Dante was escorted out, sweat-stained shirt, eyes wide and hollow. Brandon? He asked. You okay? Brandon said, voice taut. Dante looked down. They said I could make money fast. I didn't want to ask for help again. I thought I could handle it. Brandon exhaled. You never have to handle it alone again. Understand? Dante nodded slowly. Come on, Brandon said. Let's go home. Back at the cafe, Brandon sat Dante down with water and a clean shirt. Linda brought over sandwiches without a word, just a hand on Dante's shoulder. I'm sorry, Dante whispered. I thought leaving wouldn't matter. Brandon crouched beside him. It matters. You matter. And that sign you painted? Come as you are? That includes the you who makes mistakes. Dante blinked, tears forming. Brandon continued, voice softer. But now you show up again. We keep building. You're not out, you're just back. That night, Emily sat alone in her studio, composing her reply to Easton Events. Dear Kara, thank you for your generous offer and recognition of the Glass Meadow. However, I must respectfully decline. Our mission is rooted in slow growth, deep roots, and a kind of design that doesn't scale easily for good reason. We're building community, not just venues. And that takes time. With respect, Emily Tran. She hit send, then leaned back in her chair, feeling light. Not because she said no to something big, but because she said yes to herself. Chapter 15. What We Leave Behind. Autumn settled softly over Seattle, painting the trees in gold and rust. At the Glass Meadow, the final event of the season was underway, a community harvest celebration, free to the public. It wasn't a grand gala or an elegant wedding, just people gathered in laughter and warmth. Kids bobbed for apples. Local musicians played acoustic covers beneath twinkle lights. Neighbors brought homemade pies and cider. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the crisp air. Emily sat on a hay bale near the edge of the garden, bundled in a shawl, sipping cider and watching the place she had once only imagined come to life. She had done it, without shortcuts, without selling out, without losing herself, and maybe, more importantly, without running from her story. Michael joined her, brushing leaves off the seat next to her. He handed her a small wooden box engraved with her initials. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside were dozens of tiny folded notes. Emily opened the top one. "You gave me hope when I thought I didn't matter." Milo. She opened another. "Your bench gave me a place to cry without shame." "Thank you." Anonymous. And another. "This garden is where I told my daughter I was sober for 30 days. She believed me." T. Emily's breath caught. "These are from visitors?" she asked. Michael nodded. "We've been collecting them all season." They called it the gratitude box. Linda started it. Emily smiled, holding the box to her chest. Across the garden, Brandon stood with Dante and Jazz by the Kind Start booth. He watched Dante confidently teach a group of teens how to steam milk, Jazz managing the tip jar with a businesswoman's flair. He had stepped back now, letting them lead. He wasn't the center anymore, and he didn't need to be. Linda appeared beside him, sipping tea. "They're doing good," she said. "They are," Brandon replied. "They're better than I was at that age." Linda smiled. "That's the point. That's the gift." Brandon turned to her. "What about you? You thinking of finally retiring?" Linda laughed. "Retire? No. But maybe. I'll take a week off. For the first time in 12 years. He grinned. "You've earned it." "So have you," she said, squeezing his arm. "You should be proud, Brandon." He nodded, quiet. "For the first time, I am." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the garden, Layla stood on a small crate and raised a cider glass. "Before we close out this incredible season," she said, "I want to say a few words." People turned, gathering around. Every project starts with an idea. But this one, the glass meadow, started with a wound. With someone who refused to let it define her. She turned to Emily. Emily Tran didn't just build a venue. She built a refuge. A mirror. A movement. And we are better kinder because of it. Applause rippled through the crowd. Emily, overwhelmed, simply stood and bowed her head. She didn't need to speak. Not tonight. Her work had already spoken. Later, as people packed up, Emily found Brandon sitting alone on the willow bench. The one she'd promised him months ago. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He smiled. "Only if you bring cider." She handed him a cup. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Brandon said, "I've been thinking about moving." Emily blinked. "Really?" "Not far. Just into my own space. Start something new. Maybe a cafe of my own. With a Kind Start program built in." She smiled. "That sounds like something the new you would do." He looked down. "I used to think I had to take everything to feel strong. Now I know, giving something back? That's real strength." Emily nodded, her eyes misting. "I'm proud of you, Brandon." He looked at her. "And I'm proud of you, Em. You made a world out of broken pieces." She reached over, squeezed his hand. And for the first time in years, they didn't feel like two people surviving separately. They felt like family. Weeks later, when winter came, the glass meadow went quiet for the season. Emily stood one last time at the center of the garden, the wind brushing through bare vines. She looked around, at the archway, the bench, the Kind Start booth, the walls built by her hands, her pain, and her healing. Then she walked the path slowly, placing small candles along the way. A new tradition. A light for anyone who might one day wander in, lost and unsure. And at the very end, she left one last folded note on the bench. "To the next person who sits here. You're not alone. E." Then she turned and walked forward into the rest of her life. Chapter 16. New Roots, New Risks. 6 months later. Spring had arrived in Seattle again, gentler this time. Like a second chance made visible. At the glass meadow, the trees were budding anew and laughter once again filled the garden paths. Emily Tran stood outside a small brick storefront in Columbia City, keys in her hand, staring at the freshly painted sign above the door. Root and Rise Studio. Creative workshops and community design. It was hers, not an event venue, not an extension of someone else's dream, but a place she built for the people she hadn't forgotten. Artists with trauma, women rebuilding after loss, teens looking for purpose beyond school or home. Inside, drop cloths covered long wooden tables. Shelves stood bare, waiting to be filled with sketchbooks and tools. It was still unfinished, but Emily didn't mind. She had learned to see potential in the incomplete. Michael walked in from the back, holding a bundle of cables and a toolkit. "Lighting is halfway done," he said. "And your front sign? Already trending on Instagram." She laughed softly. "We haven't even opened." "Doesn't matter," he said, placing a kiss on her cheek. "People don't come just for pretty walls. They come for what you've come to represent." She looked around. "It still scares me. This next step." "Good," he said. "If it doesn't scare you, it's probably not worth it." Meanwhile, Brandon stood inside a much different space, a converted garage in Rainier Valley, where the walls were lined with mismatched chairs and old espresso machines. It wasn't elegant, but it was his. He'd just signed the lease for his own cafe and vocational training hub. The Second Cup. A space for second chances. Linda had helped secure a microloan. Emily had gifted him the espresso machine she first trained on at Sunlight Brew. And Dante? He was now officially the first employee. But starting a business was harder than Brandon had anticipated. The floor needed replacing. Licenses were still pending. His workshop flyers were met with silence from city officials. And he was dangerously close to burning through his budget. One afternoon, while scrubbing graffiti off the side wall, Dante appeared with a worried look. "There's a guy out front. Says he's from a youth funding board." Brandon wiped sweat from his brow. "Okay, let's see what he wants." A man in a gray suit stood outside holding a clipboard. He introduced himself as Derek Neal, a consultant from a private philanthropic foundation offering grants to transformative community projects. "We've had our eye on Kind Start," Derek said. "We'd like to fund your new cafe's expansion." Brandon blinked. "You've heard of us?" "Seattle's talking," Derek replied. "But there's one thing." "Here it comes," Brandon thought. "We need you to shift the branding," Derek continued. "Make it less recovery-centered, more palatable for our partners. That means no more references to incarceration, addiction, or foster system graduates." Brandon's jaw tightened. "But that's who we are," he said. Derek smiled tightly. "Yes, but it's not who your investors want to see." Brandon didn't answer right away. That evening, Emily found him in the back of the cafe, pacing, a half-torn grant application in his hand. "They want me to erase everything that makes this matter," he told her. "They want clean. They want easy. They want fake." She listened quietly. "Do I turn down $50,000 for the sake of staying honest?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. Brandon looked at her. "Because I've watched you learn the hard way," she added. "And I've watched you build this with your whole heart. Don't trade that in. Not even for 1,000 lattes and a flashy launch party." He let the paper fall into the recycling bin. "Thanks," he said. "I needed to hear it from someone who's been there." Later that week, Emily welcomed the first group into her new studio, 6 women, all survivors of domestic violence, referred through a local shelter. Their eyes were wary, their voices quiet. She didn't start with introductions. She handed them brushes and blank canvases, and then said softly, "You don't have to explain. Just begin." An hour passed, then 2. And slowly, one of the women, Janet, began to hum as she painted a sunrise over mountains. Another, Clara, painted only colors, deep red, storm blue, and finally, a streak of soft gold. By the end of the session, the room didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt alive. That night, Emily stood alone in the studio. She glanced at her old sketchpad, now battered and nearly full, resting near the front desk. She flipped to the very first page. The pencil lines were faint but familiar, a hand-drawn bench beneath a willow tree. She smiled. Her journey hadn't ended there. It had only just begun. Chapter 17. The House with No Welcome. Emily hadn't been back to the old house on 14th Avenue in over 2 years. After her parents' funeral, after Brandon took everything, she never thought she'd return. But life had a way of circling back, and this time the call came not with anger, but worry. It was a neighbor, Mrs. Anika Patel, who called. "Emily, I don't know how to say this, but someone broke into your parents' old house." I didn't know who else to contact. Emily froze. The house had technically gone into probate after Brandon defaulted on the final tax payments. It now belonged to the city, but it still held her childhood, her memories. Her mother's spice rack, her father's reading chair. Her tiny bedroom with the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. She drove there in silence. The porch steps creaked the same way they always had. But the front door hung off one hinge. Windows were shattered. The air smelled of mildew and something deeper, abandonment. Emily walked inside. The living room was stripped bare. Graffiti on the walls. Broken glass underfoot. But what made her stop cold was the object left on the mantel. A single framed photo of her and Brandon. Young, smiling, sitting on that very porch. She picked it up slowly. The glass was cracked. But the image remained. Behind her, footsteps. She turned, only to find Brandon standing in the doorway, winded and pale. "I got Mrs. Patel's message too," he said. "You came." Emily nodded. "You didn't have to." "I did," he said. "This is where we began." They walked the house together in silence. The kitchen, the upstairs hall, even their parents' bedroom, now half collapsed. "It's strange," Emily whispered. "For so long, I blamed this place. Thought it was cursed. That it made you who you became. That it made me small." Brandon looked at her. "It wasn't the house, Em. It was the pain we never named." She nodded, eyes misty. "I don't want to remember it like this." Brandon reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "What's that?" she asked. "I filed a request with the city last month," he said, "to buy it back as a non-profit training space for Kind Start, a place for hard restarts. We could fix it together." Emily blinked. "But you're already building your cafe." "We could do both. If you wanted. If you're ready to reclaim it too." She looked down at the photo in her hand, then back at him, and nodded. That same week, Brandon was blindsided by another storm. Milo, one of his earliest Kind Start graduates, had just been arrested, caught in a sting for a minor drug possession charge. Nothing violent, nothing serious. But it was enough for the city's licensing board to take notice. A letter arrived at the Second Cup Cafe. To Mr. Brandon Tran. Due to a breach of the conditions under which your provisional vocational license was granted, the city may revoke your community operations permit. A review hearing is scheduled in 10 days. Brandon dropped the letter onto the counter, his hands shaking. Dante walked in, mid-shift. "You okay?" He handed him the paper. Dante read it, face hardening. "They're using Milo to shut us down?" Brandon nodded. "They think we're unstable. A risk." Dante clenched his fists. "That's not who we are." "I know," Brandon said. "But they don't." Later that night, Brandon visited Milo in holding. "I didn't mean to screw everything up," Milo said, avoiding eye contact. "I panicked. I relapsed. I didn't want to tell anyone." Brandon leaned in. "You messed up. That's not the end. But we need to fight this." Milo shook his head. "They'll label me again. I'll lose my job. You'll lose your cafe." Brandon's voice was firm. "I'd rather lose my cafe than lose you." Milo looked at him, truly looked, and nodded. The next morning, Brandon filed for a formal defense hearing. Emily showed up to help him prep. "This isn't just about Kind Start anymore," she said. "This is about how this city defines redemption." He nodded. "I need to testify. You won't be alone." On the day of the hearing, Brandon stood before the licensing board in a stuffy municipal chamber. The panel looked stern, indifferent. But when Dante stepped up beside him, followed by Jazz and then Milo, in a clean shirt and tie, the room changed. They each spoke. About second chances. About dignity. About the difference between failure and finality. Emily spoke too. Not as a businesswoman, but as a sister. "I once thought my brother would never change," she told the board. "But I was wrong. He didn't just change. He helped others do it too." The room went quiet. Then the chairperson cleared her throat. "We'll issue a ruling by Friday." That Friday, a single envelope arrived. Brandon held it in shaking hands, opened it slowly, then laughed softly. Disbelieving. License granted. Permanent. He drove straight to the glass meadow, burst into Emily's workshop, and held up the letter like a trophy. They said yes. She laughed, wrapping him in a hug. Then they both cried, relieved, exhausted, reborn. Chapter 18. The Journal in the Wall. It started with a hammer swing. Brandon had been tearing down drywall in what used to be their parents' bedroom, now stripped bare. Emily stood nearby in a dust mask and gloves, a bucket of old nails at her feet. The house on 14th Avenue was no longer a ghost. It was a project. A joint one. They were rebuilding it not as a place to live, but as a living classroom, an extension of Kind Start and Root and Rise, where people with complicated pasts could learn skills, woodwork, design, business planning in a space full of memory and healing. But they hadn't expected to find something hidden in the wall. Brandon paused mid-swing when the hammer hit something that didn't sound like wood or wire. He set the tool down and pulled away a section of drywall with his hands. Behind the insulation, inside a small compartment built between two studs, was a worn leather-bound notebook, wrapped in twine, dusty but intact. They stared at it for a long moment. Emily was the first to speak. "That's Mom's." She recognized the handwriting even through the dust. Shaking slightly, she untied the twine and opened it. The first page was dated April 4th, 2004. "Dear Self, if you're reading this, it means you needed to remember who you were before the storms came. Before the secrets and the shame. Before the choices." Page after page revealed a side of their mother they had never seen. Her fears. Her regrets. Her hidden strength. She wrote about the business, how hard she and their father worked to keep it afloat, even as it slowly bled money. She confessed that the company had been on the edge of bankruptcy for years, but they had kept up appearances for the kids. But that wasn't the biggest revelation. It was this. David wanted to sell the company in 2003. Start over. But I said no. I was afraid of what people would think. That we'd look like failures. He listened to me. And we lost everything. I've carried that guilt like a stone. If anything happens to us, I pray Emily and Brandon will remember that appearances are not worth the cost of silence. That love, not legacy, is the thing we leave behind. Emily read the last line aloud, tears spilling down her cheeks. Brandon sat beside her, silent. Their mother had lived with that secret for nearly 2 decades. All the judgment, all the conflict, it had roots deeper than they realized. Brandon whispered, "She wasn't perfect." Emily nodded. "Neither were we." But she was trying. They sat there for a long time, not talking, just holding that journal like a map they never knew they needed. Over the next few weeks, the house transformed. Not just physically, but spiritually. Volunteers from Kind Start helped replace the windows. Root and Rise interns painted murals inside, sunflowers and winding paths and hopeful skies. A group of neighborhood teens laid the foundation for a community greenhouse in the backyard. Emily installed a memory wall in the front hallway, made of framed quotes from her mother's journal. Let them grow at their own pace. Silence can build walls, but truth opens doors. Failure isn't the opposite of legacy. It's part of it. Visitors read them with quiet reverence. The space became more than a place to work. It became a place to remember. One afternoon, Dante approached Emily with a nervous energy. You got a second? Always, she said. He handed her a folder. Inside was a grant application for a youth-led urban garden collective, fully written, budgeted, and annotated. I want to run it from the greenhouse we're building here, he said. Teach kids how to grow their own food. Start a food stand. Maybe build a network. Emily was stunned. You wrote all this? He shrugged. Well, Brandon helped me with the budget. But the vision's mine. She grinned. You're not just growing vegetables, Dante. He smiled back. I'm growing leaders. That night, Emily and Brandon sat on the front steps of the house, clean for the first time in years, a warm porch light glowing above them. Brandon handed her a photo. It was the same one they had found months earlier, young Emily and Brandon on that very porch, but now reframed, mounted on a wood plaque. I thought we should put it inside the front door, he said, where everyone can see where this all started. Emily nodded. You know, she said softly, for a long time I thought we were defined by what we lost. Brandon looked at her. But now I think we're defined by what we choose to build after. Chapter 19. The Bridge Between Worlds. The email came on a Wednesday. Emily had just finished a community workshop on mosaic art when she saw the subject line waiting in her inbox. Invitation to keynote, National Design Futures Summit 2025. She clicked it with hesitant fingers. Dear Ms. Tran, your work at the Glass Meadow and Root and Rise Studio has deeply inspired our board. We would be honored to have you deliver the closing keynote speech at our annual Design Futures Summit in Chicago this fall. We believe your story and your vision represents the future of community-centered design. Her breath caught. This was the kind of platform that launched international design careers. It was televised, published, shared. It could take her brand, her work, to places she'd never imagined. And yet, her first instinct wasn't excitement. It was fear. Fear of being away. Fear of losing the quiet, sacred rhythm of the life she had built. Fear of not belonging in those polished, professional rooms filled with legacy names and industry titans. She forwarded the email to Michael, adding only 3 words. What do you think? Brandon, meanwhile, was sorting mail at the second cup when he came across a heavy, handwritten envelope with no return address. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. To Mr. Brandon Tran. My name is Earl Mays. I'm currently serving time at Stafford Correctional Facility. I got your address from a volunteer at Kind Start who visited our prison last month. I believe one of your students, Dante Harris, is my son. Brandon froze. I left when he was little. Drugs, mostly. Then a robbery charge that got me locked up for 15 years. I don't expect forgiveness. But I saw a photo of him, smiling, working behind a counter. Said he was part of your program. I cried. I've never seen him look like that. Ever. If he's willing, could you ask him to write to me? Even once. I just want to say I'm proud of him. And thank you for reaching him when I couldn't. The letter was signed in a shaky hand. Brandon stared at the paper for a long time, unsure how to respond. That evening, Emily and Michael sat on a park bench near Lake Washington. So, the summit, Michael said, nudging her gently. She sighed. It's huge. Like, career-changing huge. But, he asked, but I don't want to become someone else to do it. I don't want to trade real people for panels and PR. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Emily, you don't need to change to be seen. You just need to show up as you, the same way you always have. That's what people remember. That's what they need. She looked at him. And what if I don't belong in their world? He smiled. Then maybe it's time you redefine what that world looks like. Across town, Brandon sat across from Dante at the back patio of the cafe. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, laying the letter gently on the table. Dante read it without speaking. When he finished, he sat back. "Wow." Brandon kept his tone careful. "You don't have to answer. Not today. Maybe not ever." Dante stared at the letter. "I don't remember much about him," he said finally. "Just his back. Leaving." Brandon nodded. "That's fair. But if he's still trying to change from where he is," Dante's voice lowered, "then maybe I should try too." Brandon said nothing, only reached across the table and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You already are," he said. "Every single day." A week later, Emily stood in her studio with a fresh canvas in front of her. She picked up a brush and wrote in bold, imperfect letters across the top. "No blueprint for healing. Only bravery." She took a picture of it, attached it to an email. "Dear Summit Committee, I accept the invitation to speak. But please know I will not come with polished credentials or flashy projections. I will come with my hands stained with clay, my voice a little unsure, and my truth rooted in real soil. Because that's how I've built everything that matters. And if that's enough, I'll see you in Chicago. With gratitude, Emily Tran." She clicked send. The next day, Dante walked into the second cup, handed Brandon a sealed envelope, and said, "Can you send this for me?" Brandon took it, glanced at the addressee, Earl Mays. "Absolutely." Dante hesitated, then added, "I don't know if he deserves a second chance." Brandon looked at him. "That's okay. He just needs to want one." Dante nodded slowly and left to begin his shift. That night, Emily and Brandon met back at the old family house, now nearly finished with renovations. She handed him a framed print of the quote she'd written on canvas. He read it, smiled. "No blueprint for healing," he repeated. "That fits us. It fits everyone we've helped," she said. They hung it in the front hallway, where the memory wall stood, where the next group of visitors would walk in and begin their own journey, and where the past, at last, rested without weight. Chapter 20. The Ones Who Return. Chicago felt larger than life. Glass towers shimmered in the afternoon sun. Taxi horns and echoing footfalls created a rhythm Emily wasn't used to anymore. She clutched her bag tightly as she stood at the side entrance of the Design Futures Summit, watching waves of sharply dressed attendees stream into the lobby. Her name was printed on the program. Closing keynote, Emily Tran, Designing for Dignity. She still couldn't believe it. Inside the green room, she paced in slow circles. Michael had offered to fly out with her, but she had said no. This was something she needed to do alone. Not because she wanted distance, but because she wanted to feel her own feet on the stage, not anyone else's push. A knock on the door. A coordinator peeked in. "Ms. Tran? We're ready for you." Emily took a long breath, then walked out into the light. The room was filled with over 300 people, designers, educators, architects, corporate partners. The kind of crowd that would have terrified her just a year ago. But now she saw something else in their faces. Curiosity. Maybe even hunger for truth. She stepped up to the mic. "I used to think good design was about what impressed people," she began. "Symmetry. Innovation. Flash." A pause. "But then I lost everything. I was kicked out of my home. I slept in my car. And I learned that real design isn't what draws applause. It's what holds people when they fall." She told them about Sunlight Brew, about the glass meadow, about benches, second chances, and hands covered in paint instead of credentials. And then she said, "We don't design for perfection. We design for the messy, aching, resilient parts of humanity. And if you're not doing that, then you're not designing for life." When she finished, the room was silent. Then, slowly, people stood. Applause erupted louder than she expected, lasting longer than she could have imagined. She blinked away tears and stepped down from the podium, heart racing. In the front row, a woman stood waiting. Early 50s, short brown curls, soft eyes. A mess. Tran? The woman asked. I'm Janet. I was in your very first workshop at Root and Rise. Emily's breath caught. You came all the way here? Janet nodded. I came to remind you what your work does. You helped me paint again. You helped me remember who I was before my bruises. I wanted you to see what healing looks like when it finally takes root. She pulled from her purse a small envelope. Inside was a photo, Janet at her first art exhibition, standing next to a painting of a cracked ceramic bowl, stitched together with gold. Kintsugi, Janet whispered. I learned it from you. Emily held the photo close, her hands trembling. This, she said, is the best thing I could have received today. Back in Seattle, the rain had returned. Brandon sat alone at the second cup, wiping tables after closing. The bell above the door jingled. He looked up. A man in a denim jacket and weathered sneakers stood in the doorway. In his hand, a small, crumpled letter. Brandon recognized him instantly. Earl, he said, standing. Dante's father gave a faint nod. His face was thin, lined, but his eyes were sober, clear. They let me out, he said. Early. Rehab. Good behavior. Brandon approached slowly. Did Dante know? I didn't want to write again, Earl said. I didn't want to push him. But I needed to see where he became who he is. Brandon pointed toward the back. You want to wait here? He asked. Dante's shift ends in 20. Earl nodded, his hands shaking slightly. Brandon poured him a coffee, sat across from him. Why now? He asked. Earl looked at the steam. Because I saw a photo of my son smiling, and I realized it was time I became someone worth meeting again. When Dante arrived, he froze at the sight. Earl stood, nervous, eyes wide. Hey, he said softly. Dante didn't move for a long moment. Then he said, sit. They talked for over an hour. Brandon didn't listen in. He didn't need to. This was their moment. 2 days later, Emily returned to Seattle. Brandon picked her up from the airport, a welcome coffee waiting in the cup holder. How was it? He asked. She smiled. Not terrifying. Just big. He handed her a letter. What's this? From Layla. She's stepping back from greenhouse. Asked if you'd consider joining the board. Emily blinked. Really? You're not just someone who designs spaces now, Brandon said. You shape people's futures. She looked out the window at the skyline of the city that once broke her, and said, maybe we all are. 6 months later, the house on 14th Avenue stood tall once again. Its windows gleamed. The porch plants had grown lush. Inside, the community kitchen hosted cooking classes. The greenhouse buzzed with life. And upstairs? A studio for journaling and restorative therapy. A plaque hung by the door. The Tran Center for Creative Renewal. Built on love. Built for second chances. On a bench beneath the willow, Emily sat beside Brandon, watching as the next group of Kind Start interns arrived for orientation. You think Mom and Dad would be proud? She asked. Brandon didn't hesitate. No. She looked at him, surprised. He added, they'd be in awe. They sat in silence. The sun pouring over the steps where 2 lost siblings had once parted ways and now returned home together. And when the wind moved through the garden, it sounded like something more than air. It sounded like peace.